Hello and welcome to another video. So today we are taking a look at a Puppet Portalcraft deck. This is actually one of the top winning decks from some recent tournaments, so it's not too surprising that these decks are still quite good. Of course, we don't have long until there will be some adjustments to decks with some changes coming in, so it'll definitely be interesting to see with the new cards shake things up. Hopefully they'll make a pretty nice impression, but for the next couple of days, you've still got this deck to fall back on. Of course, right now, I found this deck to be performing a little below average just because opponents tend to be either teching against you or knowing exactly how to play against you. So usually Sword and Haven are really bad matchups for this deck, in particular because they can usually just either rush you down with aggro or beat you really hard. And of course, Forest has always been a reasonably bad matchup to begin with, so that's always a little disappointing. On Haven's end mostly though, they will just control you, wipe out your board and continually heal, which you can't deal with that super easily. So honestly, this deck is still rock solid. It's definitely one of the easy top decks at the moment. You know, you've got Haven, you've got this Puppet deck. You also have a Forest, either aggro or mid. I'm not really sure what you'd class them as at the moment. Mostly aggro, I think. And the final top deck would probably be Chimera, as that's still doing extremely well in the current meta. So right now, we're just going to cover Puppet Portal and have some fun, so we'll get right into it and check it out. So some great points for this deck I've found so far has been that you can have a lot of nice early pressure. It's just a matter of being able to draw it. Usually, of course, if you get silver like this, you're usually pretty set. So most of the time, 99% of the time, you want to hold that for the early turns. Of course, you do also want a nice 2-drop, especially in a match like this where you're up against Sword, where you need to be extremely aggressive. You want to be playing your 2-drop quite comfortably without really any big issues, as you will get run over pretty hard if you're not careful. So Hamlin is actually pretty solid. Of course, the 1-drop here is going to pretty much kill off that, but at least it negates a little bit of potential damage. Not so lucky though, they do go for Hedgehog, which means my silver's pretty much out of being playable now, as Substitution is going to be a better option to remove things when you come up against a Hedgehog. Hedgehog is just kind of a nightmare card to deal with, especially if they follow up immediately with Mars and you have to deal with all of that. But we finally get a chance to play Nicholas, which is good. I do enjoy that card. It's probably one of the key cards of this deck. Puppets always seem to have struggled with their mid game, and Nicholas is pretty much perfect for that. It's a really solid turn 4 play, and by the time you're ready to go for your big drops, Nicholas has activated its Rombi, so it's always a nice card to use. Plus, you can even combo it with Spinaria and get extra ping damage if it's set up well. So to go for the Evo for the, I believe, Guardian Golem on this one. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I go for Strike Form. I go for Guardian because it's a little bit more of a defensive play. That way I can just wipe these out pretty comfortably and not really need to worry.
My apologies.
Most of your Evos will just go to dealing with threats. That's usually what I use them for. Otherwise you will just use them on the Puculus and get a Golem of some form and use that to your advantage. So this matchup is a little bit of a pain because we do need to get rid of the 5-6. I debated on this turn for quite a long time initially when playing because I wanted to come up with the best strategy to remove as much as I could. So deciding to leave up the 3-2 at least to start with was the only real option I could come up with that was feasible. I would have loved to have sent my Puppet in and just done it that way, but honestly didn't really have that as an option. So I did decide to use the Puppets to get rid of the 3-2 instead. That way I can send at least the 4 damage to face. Frontline Cavalier, not a card I enjoy fighting, especially since heals make it even harder for Puppets to get the win off a lot of the time. But overall, this deck's still really solid. As I mentioned, you will get countered a lot. I mean, normally going up against a Sword deck like this can be quite difficult. Lucky for me, I just had the right tools at the right time to deal with most of this and had a little bit of luck to go along with it, as you need when you're fighting decks like this. So we got the Strike Form Golem at least, which is a pretty nice advantage to have, as it does give us a couple of pings, so some nice pings will really help us out this game. I mean, the odds of hitting at least the 4-1 was reasonably high, so that did at least give us the win here, not having to go into our turn 8 Orcus play. And next up, we are actually against Haven, so this video is mostly my bad matchups normally for these couple of games, but luckily we actually pulled off some pretty neat wins, or at least consistently, which is good. These are the kind of plays you want to be able to make with this deck. In particular, getting silver in the opener is something you really want to mulligan for. I do tend to try and keep a 2 or 3 drop if I believe I'm in a matchup where I can. Otherwise, I do recommend mulligan everything, especially if you come against an aggro deck. So against Sword and Forest, I would probably usually mulligan everything in favor of getting a silver, because that will really help your game. In a Haven matchup though, I can play a little bit more conservatively, just be slightly more careful, because they're going to negate most of my ping damage with heals anyway. Also, having Automation Knight and Silver is probably one of the best combinations right now. Of course, when the new cards are added, there will definitely be a better target to go for, so I am looking forward to that. Mori's a pretty slow removal, which is good for us. It means we are going to get some decent damage in. And turn 4 Nicholas, so as you can see, very straightforward strategy. Turn 3 Silver into turn 4 Nicholas is one of the biggest ways you can really win games, as it will secure your mid to late game very well. Especially if you're going first. You'll find going first in this particular case is usually good. Of course, most decks will find the high win rate when they're going first, because most competitive decks right now sit in a mid-range to more aggressive style of play, excluding Haven, where winning going second actually isn't impossible unless you do come up against something control yourself. So if you do come up against a Mirror Haven going first, obviously you have an advantage. If you come up against something like Chimera Rune, it's more in Chimera Rune's favour to begin with, so they usually win out games regardless of you going first or second. And most other aggro decks will beat you going first if they go first anyway, although Haven obviously has a better chance against most of those decks with its healing. So really we're just securing the game here, playing out everything, getting more Sylvia out so we can ping some extra damage off. Plus we quite comfortably remove this with 0 issue and go for an extra 5 damage to the face, which really sets up a long-term game. So it looks like we've pretty much secured the game from this point. Of course, anything can happen and anything always does, so this Haven player actually does fairly well at being able to remove things in their favor, which definitely helps them out a fair bit. So I do get Norkius, which is pretty great, but it does mean I need a target for it, so I do go for the little puppeteer, just to get us that extra puppet to use. And we see the couple of White Fang Temples, not really any kind of issue, as they're only going to heal up to 5, which puts them still in range, plus they didn't manage to clear our board anyway, which means we've won the game on board, but just for a little bit of flair, playing the Orcus isn't bad. I mean, when you can, you want to get that thing out, because it is a lot of fun and it has some wonderful animations. So a nice 5 damage off this puppet play, thanks to the silver effects as well. So if you guys did enjoy this deck, it is still a lot of fun to play puppets personally. After all, puppets were very underrated to begin with in Portal, especially if you joined pre-Chronogenesis. When before Portal was even introduced, you'll know that a lot of people thought this deck was pretty garbage, and to see it actually come up in this expansion, really, really exciting. I mean, it just shows. A lot of people now are calling for artifacts to be buffed, but really, obviously, those are the players that don't remember how powerful artifacts actually were, and were considering Portal pretty bad, because artifacts were relatively strong when they first launched. A lot of people didn't agree, but it was just more so they didn't know how to play them a lot of the time. So really exciting to see that Portal is really becoming one of the strong contenders in these lineups, and I really enjoy seeing them in tournaments, so it's great that we have a lot of this kind of decks floating around at the moment. Also, tomorrow's video we will have Haven. We are going for a Tenko Summit build because that is very popular and does fairly well. And that will pretty much close out till the next expansion. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, like it, and of course, subscribe if you want more content. And I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.